Hello, my name is John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, the capital of northern British Columbia, and absolutely a beautiful day in northern BC. And I have a very, very special guest today. It is Mayor Sarrah Storey, from the Mayor of Fraser Lake.
Thank you for having me.
Sarrah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So, you are a northern girl, right? So you grew up virtually in the north. Tell me a little bit about your past.
Yeah, I was born in North Vancouver, actually. So there's the first north. But then we traveled farther and we went to Prince George. I lived here most of my life. I left.
Some odd years.
Yeah, I left here in 2005 and moved to Fraser Lake. But I grew up here in Prince George, and then I went to Kelly Road, and I went to Blackburn, and I went to Hart Highway. It was a long time here, and I still call it home in many ways.
Right.
My sister's still here. My family did a lot here in Prince George, and we still do.
And then you worked in the forest industry. You worked for Paul Lumber or their...
Well, I worked for Winton Global, actually.
Yeah,
originally, I was in their marketing department, and then I went to West Fraser and did accounts payable and other things there. And I've been in the forestry industry a little bit here and there, but not hugely compared to some people.
But you were always close to it, right? So
I feel like we're part of it because we're a big conservation family. So we're always hunting and fishing, and we rock collect. We're always out in nature, enjoying it too. And my parents are part of Spruce City Wildlife Association and BC Wildlife Federation. My mom's a wildlife artist, so there's a lot of stuff that we do in the great outdoors.
Yeah, and then looking at your background, you worked on the bank for a period of time.
Yeah, I worked here on 3rd Avenue before the bank burnt down on Central, the Bank of Montreal. So I worked.
Oh my God, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. That was one of my jobs.
Was that part of the hotel then?
Yes, it was part of the Yellowhead Hotel, yeah.
The whole hotel burned down and all the other things around it.
Yeah, it was kind of a sad day. I was actually in Grand Forks visiting my baba, and all of a sudden I got a phone call saying, hey, the bank is burning down on Central. So that was a big day, so I had to change the way all the employees worked and amalgamated, and it changed a lot, actually.
But it's kind of interesting. They rebuild the bank virtually in the same location, plus or minus, right? On West Central, right?
Yeah, and then they got rid of the other one on 3rd, which is kind of sad, but... Yeah, I had a lot of jobs, actually, in this town, in this region, so it's been good.
So then you went to Fraser Lake, or did you go to Vanderhoof?
No,
first?
I went to Fraser Lake, and then I ended up commuting to the district of Vanderhoof. I was a manager of recreation in Vanderhoof for a couple of years before I had children, and it was a good experience, a really great job. Yeah.
And then you ended up in Fraser Lake.
Yeah, so that was kind of an interesting scenario. I thought, we'll move to Fraser Lake. We'll be there a couple of years. And then apparently I decided to stay for life, and then became the mayor. I don't know how that all happened, but that's where I'm at.
You always wonder, doesn't it? And you were on council first, right?
Yeah, I actually ran for mayor in 2014 and lost by 49. I was not on council at that time. Right. And then I ran in a by-election a few months later, and then got on and was on council for just over 3.5 years-ish. And then I ran for mayor again in 2018. I got on, and then I ran again, and nobody ran against me this time, so I was acclaimed. So
how many years have you been mayor, Sarrah?
This will be my 5th year right now.
Yeah, that's a long time in the mayor's position.
It went by really quick, though. Like you're so busy, like the years, the months just fly by. Yeah. I literally plan my life in years now, not months or weeks or days. Yeah.
So can you talk about your children? Have you got...
Yeah, I have 2 boys, Hunter and Rylan. They're
how old are they?
Rylan is 11, and he loves dancing, and he's just an outdoors kid. He's always at the skateboard park or doing something fun. They both love hockey. Hunter's 12. He'll be 13 in April, and he loves hockey, and he's a smart kid. They both are. They're just really good humans, and that's what makes me happy. I did something right as a parent.
How quick it goes, right?
I don't know where the time went.
I have 2 daughters, and like I still know today that we want to deliver them here in Prince George, going in the elevator, and now I look back and that's 40 some odd years ago. Just like that, gone.
It goes really quick. I don't know how they got that old that quick, but they're good kids. I'm proud of them every day.
Were you always kind of thinking about politics?
No.
How did it happen then?
Well, I guess when you start working for a municipality, some things start changing maybe in your mind then. That might be part of how I got to where I am. But I guess I decided, well, if I'm living in this community, I better make it better. And I was I'm big on volunteerism. Anywhere I go, I tote volunteerism. Like every single person should volunteer. It's very important, especially for a resume for youth. But I volunteered for everything. I was, I started a registered charity called Autumn Services with my mother-in-law that helps seniors age in place, which created more obvious avenues for me. And I was working for Work BC, and I was working when the mine closed. They asked me to work for them, and I was working for the College of New Caledonia, doing the job options program and the CALP program and all of these different things. And Community Spirit Family Fun Day and the dance and socials, and there was all these different events and options and things that just needed to happen in Fraser Lake. And I've been the president of the Ball League for I think 12 years or something ridiculous, but we just needed people to step up. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have kids, and then I had kids, and then I'm going to stay in this community, then I better step up and make it better. There's no point in complaining about something if you're not going to try to fix it.
Exactly. Stepping up to the plate, right? So, so the other part then is for our guests that are watching, and we have a lot of guests watching from all over, and even from around the world. Actually, we had a guest last week. I don't know if you saw it or not. Which one is this again? This is episode number 83, I believe. And then we have done before that about 15 or 16 other ones with 25, I think, other ones with Shaw before that. But last week what we did is we did a virtual with a fellow in Sweden. Wow. Jan Hedberg. I've known him for a long time. And he was, in Sweden, central Sweden's Sundsvall. And I was here. It's amazing what technology will do. And if you watch it, it looks like CNN. The two people are close together. We have all our equipment. Andrew had a lot to do with that, and Scott, kind of making sure that we have a very, very professional studio. And so we were comparing the forest industry in Sweden and the one in BC. And I think we have about close to 100,000 views right now.
That's awesome.
About three days ago that we did it, 3-4 days ago. So it's being watched all over the world.
That's great.
So for that reason, I just want to say that the mayor of Vanderhoef will not like that when I say that, but I say Prince George is in the center of the province, although he would say, no, stop, it's Vanderhoef. Okay, I give him that one. Yeah. So, but then how far is Fraser Lake from here?
It's about an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, about.
It depends on how fast you drive, but it should be about an hour and 45.
Yeah. So about 120 Ks or
kilometers? 150 maybe, about that.
Yeah. And how many people in Fraser Lake?
There's about 1,100 in town, and then the Coastal GasLink camp outside of the community, and then there's about 2,000-3,000 in the region at any given time, because it's a big area, a lot of lakes, and the North Shore of Fraser Lake and Francois Lake and Nechako and the Notley-Wettin and the Slatin First Nation communities are on either side of the community as well.
It's an amazing outdoors community area there, because you got all the lakes around here, and the outdoors here in all of northern British Columbia, but also Fraser Lake obviously is amazing, right? The lakes and...
It's beautiful. We have a lot of potential in Fraser Lake too, being only an hour and a half-ish from Prince George. I mean, a lot of people, utilize Prince George as a hub too, but Fraser Lake is a hub for our little area there, and there's a lot of people that come through and and visit with their boats or whatever they might be doing, or go hunting or fishing. But it's a really nice area to live in.
So if you look at Fraser Lake now, what industry is there? I know there is lumber. There's a sawmill.
Yeah, well, right now, West Fraser Sawmills is down to one shift, so the sawmill isn't...
That's West Fraser,
yeah,
right?
that's West Fraser, and it's not like, obviously, the best situation that we've seen with forestry. And Nechako Mine has been closed for a lot of years now, and we're not seeing
open
that...
up again?
Well, we're hoping, but there's no...
What is it mining?
Molybdenum.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a hardener that goes into steel, so...
Okay.
Yeah, it helps harden the steel, and that's just something that obviously is needed. So in times where you need to produce more steel, the price goes up, and right now the price has been pretty high steadily for quite a long time. But the owners of Mount Milligan, they're into gold, so they don't really mine the moly yet, but we're hoping one day they might want to take that on, or even offload it and sell it to a company that might want to make some money on that.
So there is no lack of the right molybdenum in the property. It's just a question of the economics, right?
Yeah, because the price of molybdenum went down so low that they just weren't making money. And when they built a bigger plant, and when they did that, then their costs outweighed what they were making, and they just couldn't keep going. But hopefully it opens again one day.
Where is the location vis-a-vis downtown Fraser Lake?
It's about 15 minutes west.
So it's right part of your community, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, most of the people, there's about 300 workers that lived in the community that commuted every day up there and back, and that was nice versus what we have now, which is predominantly camp jobs.
Yeah, and then the on the lumber side is West Fraser, that has had that mill for quite a number of years.
Yeah, it actually was originally in Fraser Lake at White Swan Park. They had the mill there before, and they moved it farther down the lake, and it's been there a long time, and it employed a lot of people over the years, and we're hoping it still continues on. If it's hard with the price of lumber right now, obviously,
so
as you know. So
when did it go down to one shift?
Oh, that would have been last year. I'm not sure. I can't remember what month now, but it was last summer. I think I was in Souk, and I got a phone call that it was going down another shift. So I want to say July, August. It went.
So was it
down.
running 2 shifts?
Yeah,
4 days a week.
It went from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. So yeah, it's been just, and I wouldn't say slowly. It's quite quickly. It's been going down. Down shifts, and it's been really, it impacts the entire region, because not everybody works from Fraser Lake.
Exactly.
There, it's Vanderhoof, in Daco, Fort Fraser. There's lots of people that work.
Well, the multiplier is usually, if for every job there is 2 indirect jobs, or even sometimes 3 indirect jobs. So the impact on the region and the community is very significant, right? That's
right. And when I got the phone call, actually, they were like, oh, it'll be about 77 workers. And I said, 77 workers just at the sawmill. That doesn't include the truckers. That doesn't include, all the equipment operators. And a lot of those people in our region, they own their own equipment. They have their own forestry, their own businesses, and they have loans on some of that equipment. So all of a sudden, if they go, we can't afford to pay our loans, which is what we saw, a few years ago when everything crashed too. Yeah. When everything crashed
with COVID.
With the lumber market before COVID.
Yeah, 2007, 2008, 2009.
There was I think I had just become mayor, so in 2018. When the markets really crashed and people had to pay their stumpage rates, which had skyrocketed, all of a sudden we saw this, the sawmills going down shifts. And when that happened in Fraser Lake, it really impacted our community. And we saw those workers and those owners go, what do we do? We're going to have to, declare bankruptcy or whatever might happen here. So we ended up hiring a lot of those workers actually at our community forest. We're up to about 70 workers at our community forest that opened shortly after. So it worked out actually okay at that point because all of a sudden we could hire those people.
Right.
But at that moment, it did not feel very good for anybody in our
significant
region.
Right?
And that was our first real major cut at that sawmill that we saw.
Yeah. And up to that point, the pine beetle was very, very devastating. But in the short term, from 2000 till about 2015, 16, 17, we had a major uplift.
Yep.
And then obviously had to come back down to where it was before, and then even less than that. And that's kind of where we are right now. Right?
Yeah, and Fraser Lake is one of those interesting communities that's in between two TSAs, so the Prince George and the Lakes TSA. So we could kind of grab from both if it worked out, and things, with everything that was going on with the markets, and then how we were working with our community forest and what was going on with the First Nation communities. There was all that balance trying to be found, and I don't know if it's been found yet. I was part of the coalition in the Lakes TSA, and we sent recommendations off to the Premier, and nothing's really happened with that yet. So we're waiting to hear if things can change, and we've asked for an uplift with our community forest as well, because I think we've done a really great job with our community forest. I have to tell you,
right.
I can show you later, but the pictures that we have with our community forest, the retention of all the juvenile trees that we leave behind, we were using European methods to really keep a lot of those juvenile trees and to protect the streams, and it doesn't look like a complete clear cut, and we were making sure we were using every piece of fiber. So we were selling everything to every single place we could, so pulp and fiber to everywhere, and we were making sure that we were doing the environment justice and the people. We weren't probably making as much money as the majors were,
right.
in some ways, because we were doing things slower on purpose to
right.
be purposeful to the
right.
to the environment and to.
How much volume do you have?
Well, we've logged since we've harvested about 400,000 cubic meters now.
Is that your license that you have?
No,
then?
it was about 46,000 cubic meters a
Annual?
year. Yeah. And it's kind of, it wavered a bit because of the mountain pine beetle. So that was what we were offered originally, but
right.
it's kind of fluctuated, if
right.
that makes sense. And then, but most of the stuff that we're harvesting is damaged trees. So we're going into areas that, typically the majors don't want.
Right.
And we made really good, like we were really lucky. We actually made a really good amount of money to help our community.
Well,
and that's why I love
it,
community
right?
forests, because
Yeah.
then you can be sustainable on your own.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is, I think, really important for a community like ours that was really struggling with industry.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of our guest is that, what we are talking about really is that in British Columbia, there is a annual allowable cut of the forest on the coast and in the interior for a total of about 60 million cubic meters annually. Then in the interior in particular, for a period of about 10, 12 years, during the time of the pine beetle, it uplifted to about 80 million, it then went back to 60, now it's probably closer to around 35 to 40. And especially because of the pine beetle, 17, 18, 19, we had lots of fires that reduced the annual allowable cut further. And obviously, since that time, there have been other shifts within the AAC. More timber by law is being committed to First Nations. That's a good thing, and they will also share in the revenue. And then the other one was a bit of controversial, actually, is deferrals of old growth.
Yeah.
I support that. The only thing, but most people don't fully understand, is that we, including myself in a lot of cases before, kind of refer to old growth as these massive timbers down the coast, but old growth could also include trees about this size in the interior, simply because they are over 150 years old.
Yeah.
That's not good. And so that's still hopefully a work in progress. And then you do, we do. I'm also quite involved in COFI. I'm the longest serving board member as well as the vice chair of COFI, amazingly. So we are quite vocal about that part. And then the other part, as part of the intentions paper, is that to stimulate secondary manufacturing.
Yeah.
And we have been, as a company, the Brink group of companies have been very active in that. We have a major operation here in Prince George, have had that for the last nearly 50 years. And then an operation in Vanderhoof, as you likely know. Vanderhoof Specialties is one of our companies, and another one in Houston. I believe there is good potential in more value-added manufacturing. We have to add more value to the forest that we have, which compared to other forests in the rest of the world, we are very, very fortunate with the type of forest we have and the quality that we have of forest and the potential for further manufacturing of the value chain. So I would hope that we in the future will do more of that and change policies that will stimulate that and attract capital.
There's a lot of potential with our forests. And looking at what we've done with our community forests, using stands that nobody really wanted and cleaning up those forest floors is really important for our region. As you mentioned, we have a lot of fires, and we've been having a lot around Fraser Lake, and that, obviously reduces our AAC, but the potential to use some of that, even that burnt wood. We've talked about these things. How long is that wood good for? So there's been talks around 48 months, 24 months, but regardless, we should be getting in there when you only have the bottoms burnt about like this much off the top, and then you have all this perfectly good tree that's going to end up falling down. I'm of the understanding, the moose habitats are doing much better in Fraser Lake, where we have went and cleaned up the floors. There is obviously, decomposition and nutrients that need to go back into the ground for sure. But when you have places where you're seeing all the trees just down and it's just a mess because all of the beetle kill, that's not normal. Normally a fire would come through and clean that up anyway, regardless. And that's not really always happening.
Now, what you have is an area-based tenure rather than a volume-based tenure.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the tenures that we have in the industry throughout the province are volume-based tenures, and a lot of times the industry or whoever owns that communities will not necessarily invest in that because they do not reap the benefits of it. By having it as area-based, then by intensive forestry, you can virtually, and I would suggest you watch my podcast with John Hedstrom comparing the two countries together. Similar forest, actually, very, very amazingly similar to ours, where they're growing virtually double the amount of fiber per hectare from what we do. And that is precisely doing what you were saying, Sarah, is making sure that there's room to grow.
Yeah.
Don't use chemicals to suppress all of that, and managing it more. So I'm certainly a big supporter of community forest. So
I think the community forest is the one positive thing that's come out of the last few years with COVID and everything else. It's just really brought positive change and feeling to our community. It's just been great to see all of the good that's come out of it. There's so many things. We're really proud of it, actually. I have to tell you, just our staff have done a really great job too, and I have to give kudos to them. And we've hired some really good people to get it done. And we could have went through a major company, and we could have taken a lower rate, and we negotiated and we sold it for fair market value instead. And we did some really innovative things throughout.
It's good for the community.
It was, because the community was really, really struggling at the time.
Yeah.
And you really got to put the community first. And I really talk about social responsibility with industry a lot. And that's something that really needed to kind of happen in our area.
Yeah.
And working on that with industry has been really important to me.
Yeah. Now the other thing that's going on today in particular, we have the Northern Natural Resource meetings happening today, tomorrow, and Friday, and a lot of people are here. Very good speakers, and including the new premier of the province. And obviously, just before this all happened, we had an announcement, coincidental, by Canfor to close down one of their pulp mills. Prince George Pulp, especially their pulp line, not so much their paper line, and and that will affect direct jobs, about 300, very significant.
We just had a meeting with Artemis Gold, and they're looking for a lot of workers. So we're hoping that some of those workers, if they need jobs, maybe can apply there. They were talking about that today. I'm really, really sorry for the people that have lost their jobs.
Obviously.
That they've had a really, long career with. Some of these people have, I grew up with their
30
parents. They've been working there a long time, and now their kids are working there. So it's really hard to see any industry in any community go down, and the impacts are felt so broadly to not just this community, like all the communities that surround it too. Like
exactly.
We feed into each other. We really do. So if something happens in Vanderhoof, it does impact Prince George, and something happens in Fraser Lake, it impacts Burns Lake.
No question about that.
Yeah.
Northern BC in particular, all those communities are very, very closely together, including going further south, Quesnel, Williams Lake. We saw that again, how closely they all work together during a time of a disastrous period when we had all the fires, how all those communities work so closely together. And now, coming back to the pulp mills, I came here in 1965, and that's when they were, and when I came, that was my dream. We were liberated by the Canadians in Holland, April the 12th, 1945. Made such an impression on me that I knew, I was only 5 years old, but I was born in 1940. I knew then already when I was 5 years old I would go to the lands of my heroes, Canada. For me, it was just a matter of time, not if, but when. Then I tried to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted in the Dutch Air Force, and then I won when I was 24. But I want to start from the bottom.
Right.
So I took $150 with me when I left Holland, and then came to Vancouver, and then couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and talked to a German fellow and told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, that's where they're building pulp mills and sawmills, is booming, a boom town. That's where you have to go. So I did. I went on the bus, came off the bus here a couple of blocks away from here, and I had my suitcase, I had 2 sets of clothes, I had 3 or 4 books in my suitcase, and I had $25.47. But I was going to build a sawmill.
Okay, I want to go back to those books for a second, though. Did you ever read those books that you brought over? Because I remember reading in your book, you said you didn't actually read those books yet, but...
Those I did.
Good.
Because the one was, and I actually posted them, I still have them, all 3 of them.
Good.
Logical Thinking in Dutch, and then Management by Drucker, but all in Dutch. And I read those several times because, again, being ADHD, I don't read books usually.
right.
You know, but it takes something to get my interest, and then I will, you know, so, but it doesn't happen very often, you know.
I'm the same way. If it interests me, it's read I'm a very fast reader. So I remember in high school, Kelly Road, I went and grabbed the Pillars of the Earth because it was the biggest book in the whole school. And I thought, I'm going to see how fast I can read this. I think I got it done in 2 days, but I could typically read a book in about 4 or 5 hours. So, you know, you try to, challenge yourself sometimes, but most of the time it has to interest you. And I've been always the same way. If it didn't interest me, like in school, well, no, I didn't want to do it.
You see, for the benefit of our listeners, what we are really talking about is that I'm ADHD, and I didn't know that until I was 57. And I came here, I was already in Prince George. And when I was in Prince George, I went to a store on books on third, and for whatever reason, strangely, I opened up a book there and I looked in it, and it said, Driven to Distraction. And I started reading it. It was about ADHD. I'd never even heard of it. And I thought, oh my God, that is me. And I went through it and through it. Finally, the guy that owned the store said, "You gonna buy it or what?" So kind of thing. And obviously, I bought it. But then I wrote in the book in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am, and and then from there on, I knew I was ADHD, but there was a lot of stigma attached to it, and but I failed grade 3. Yeah. Nobody fails grade 3. You probably know some. And
I failed grade 2 because I missed it. I wasn't there, but I mean, still, I understand. I had a hard time reading actually growing up.
Me too.
When I was young, I had a skull fracture. Actually, I had absent seizures till I was 8.
Yeah.
Look at me now. I mean, you can do anything with your life, and I think it's really important that you tell your story and other people tell their stories, because there's amazing people out there and they have either disabilities that doesn't matter, or they have ADHD, or they have different things, and it actually makes them better people. It makes them unique people. It drives them. They have different determination. And there's so many good qualities in people. Wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same, first of all? So I do appreciate knowing all of these things about people, and then realizing and learning them about yourself, because it's nice to look at yourself and go, oh, this is who I am and this is why. Yeah. Sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it's parents and upbringing, but
So I failed grade 7 3 times, and then they say, okay, well, maybe we should take him out of school, send him to mentally challenged school, or get him a job. So fortunately, they got me a job, and then I became a furniture maker, and then I wanted to prove to myself that I can do it. So I wanted to build a lumber mill. I was going to build it in BC. I was going to start with nothing, and so I had this one here. I like it. I had $25.47 in my pocket, and then the other part that's important to me is attitude, passion, work ethic. What follows that is success. And then, so that's kind of how I started, and from the ground up, and the rest is all in the book, Against All Odds. And, the book, I always say it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And since that one, and that is mainly about precisely the things you're talking about, Sarrah, is saying that everything is possible. And, and for me, it's important to talk about it, including ADHD. And it took a while for me to talk about it because there's so much stigma attached to it. What am I going to do? Talk to the banker and say, I want to lend money from you, but I'm mentally challenged? Then he would say, have a nice day, right? So it took some time. Now, obviously, much more accepted. So I felt I had to write a book about that as well. And that one, I'm going to give you a copy, sign one for you before you go. That's talking about ADHD and all the things around it. And I call it a superpower.
I think there's a lot of superpowers out there, and I think that's actually probably one of them. You've seen some there was a movie I watched recently, and it was I'm trying to think of what the person had, and they were just phenomenal, and it just made them a better person. And yeah, there's some cool superpowers out there. I have 2 quotes in life. With your 3, mine are do more than your share and leave the world better than you found it. And I live by those 2.
And I agree 100%. So, and it's interesting with you in particular because you know your ADHD. It took me when I read the book. Yeah. It took me 5 years before I wanted to go to my dog.
Yeah.
That I knew delivered my daughters and all before I could go to him. One day I walked into his office 5 years after I read it, and he said, "Okay, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." So he said, "Let's talk about it," and that's how I got diagnosed. But now more and more and more and more, the stigma is disappearing and saying, "Okay, it's not a disadvantage.
No.
It makes you slightly different, and and it's all good. It's a superpower, and how can you make it work for you and make it better?" And that's why I wrote the book and wanted to make sure I did that. So.
Well, I'm glad you did. I think it helps other people.
Yeah.
Along the way in their journey in life, and I think reducing stigmatism on anything. And I mean, I always tell people to, we always get checked out, and we go to the doctor, we get a physical, but your check, you're supposed to get the checkup from the neck up, the sort of situation that's what they talk about. And I think that's really important that people are working on their mental health, because in this day and age, it's really vital that you're checking in with yourself, checking in with others, and
exactly.
taking care of all of the things. Because if you don't have certain things, including your brain, you can't really function in life. So exactly. You really do need to take care of your mind and your body and your spirit in a good way.
Yeah, and the other part for me, what was important is that and against all odds, as you already know, because you work part of the book you have read, it's not about hurrah, John, how successful he is. That's not what it is about. It is against all the challenges and all the things that happen, still being able to stay the course and succeed from that point forward. And success is not making millions of dollars or anything like that. It's not about that. It's saying I feel good about myself. Usually in the mornings when I get up, I'm usually quite happy, and I usually get up at 5:30 in the mornings. I make my bed before I leave, always, and then I go to work. And most of the times at work, I enjoy my job.
I enjoy my jobs too. I wear a lot of hats in this province, and I do a lot of things. I don't know really why I do everything I do. I just kind of sort of happened. And then I realized I get a lot from my mother and her drive. Like, my mom could build anything. My mom could do anything. She decided, she wanted a Robert Bateman original, and decided, well, I'll just paint it instead and do it myself. So I get a lot from my mom. But, when I think about my drive and determination to make the world a better place, or to do what I'm doing for my children or the community, or, just people as a whole, because I see all of these things. Like, I'm on the Union of British Columbia Municipality Board. This is my 3rd year. I just got put back on that board, and right. I was president of the North Central Local Government Area Association. I mean, I was pretty young when I did all these things. I'm now 42. Right. And, I'm now the president of the Northern Medical Programs Trust as of last week. That, I don't know how that happened. And that, I say yes to things, and I get things done. And I also work for United Way, BC, and help people from Quesnel up, age and place. I oversee all the programs. So, I mean, I have a lot of hats, and I do a lot of things to help people, and it gives me a sense of purpose. I know one day when I leave this earth, nobody will say, well, she didn't do a whole lot with her life. At least they'll say, she tried something, and she tried to make it work, and she hopefully I made somebody's life better because of it.
Exactly. I'm sure you will. So this morning I had a meeting with a number of people, except from the Ministry of Forest, but because of all the things that are going on. So I gave them a tour of the mill and blah, 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 and told them some of the things that I do. And the one fellow said, before he left, said, "Can I ask you one question?" I said, "Well, sure." He said, "How are you doing all of this that you're doing?" I said, "ADHD. Is one, and the other one, I sleep fast."
Well, and I was telling Scott when I was coming up here. I was like, I don't sleep. Like, I typically like go to bed around lately it's been actually worse, between 2 and 3. And then I'm up at 7, 8, it depends. But yeah, I don't sleep a lot. I don't really want to sleep though. I really want to just
got so much going on.
Do more, like I'm like, there's things like, there's no time for sleeping. I can sleep when I'm dead. And I feel like people say that way too much, but I really do think that that's a thing with me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that I have that drive to always be awake and doing things. I mean, I just finished 5 years on the North Central Local. Yeah, I'm thinking. I just finished 5 years on the North Central Local Government Board. I was the president of the North Central Local Government, which is 70% of the land mass. Yeah. So, I missed that board so much, and apparently the regional district just put me back on that too. So I'm busy, and then 2 kids and hockey, and and
the kids, especially at that age, is so important, right? As well, they keep you busy, and obviously it's beautiful, especially at that age, right?
Well,
and it's so quickly do they grow up, right?
Yeah, they're pretty busy kids. They always want to be doing something, and we're always out in nature doing something too. Yeah. And then I bought a Labradoodle. I'm not sure why I did that, but she's a year old, and I call her name's Reign of Terror. She's the best, but we always are doing something busy with our lives, and the community is busy too. Being a mayor is a full-time job. So you don't really, like, especially in a small town, I will tell you, there's been some interesting scenarios, and I'm pretty sure the mayor of Prince George has never got a phone call that says, "Hey, Sarah, there's chickens all over the road," or "Hey, Simon," we'll go with Simon. "Hey, Simon, there's chickens all over the road. We need chicken feed." I'm pretty sure he doesn't get those phone calls, but I get those phone calls. That scenario does happen. I've had some really interesting scenarios. I mean, there was cows all over the highway recently. I'm sure nobody got a phone call that was a mayor for that one when that happened. Sure. But like, there's, in small towns, I don't have staff that write my speeches or do my work for me. I do all of my own bookings, my hotel rooms. Nobody answers my emails. Like, I do it all.
It's more like a family show. Sarah, that's what I think. Yeah, because everybody knows you, and they're relying on you. That when things becomes difficult, then that is the extension of being a mayor.
Well, I think I also make myself very available. I run Heck Yeah Fraser Lake, and people are like, "Sarah, when's the skating schedule coming out, or is there public skating tonight?" Like, they always know. If you don't know something, ask Sarah. She always knows the answer. So I think I've made myself, it's maybe made a problem for myself, because now sometimes I feel bad if I don't answer somebody right away, because they're quite used to me being so reactive. And I mean, it was really bad when the fires were in Fraser Lake. I have to tell you, I think I was awake 24 hours a day, just trying to communicate, and because that was the big thing, communication for people. And I think that's why probably they like me in Fraser Lake, because I'm good at communicating and being friendly and open and kind to everyone. And I think that's important as a leader. Not everybody does does things the way I do, and I don't expect them to. We all do things differently.
That's what makes you unique, right? So in what you do, you love your job. You have the passion that goes with it. It's just not a position for whatever reason, other than you have the deep feeling about what you have and taking responsibility. The other thing I want to talk to you about a little bit about, obviously that's another reason that we are here today. Not here, you and me, because we should do that, but since we both are going to attend later on the meeting here at 4:00, and then the dinner at 6:30 or so, I think, is that when I came here in 1965, they were building pulp mills and sawmills and all the other things. Obviously then, and basically where I'm going with this is saying, well, who is to blame for all of this? If anyone at all, right? So, that obviously in the early 80s, we had a spruce beetle attack in the Bowron region, and that, they had to take out a fairly major piece. They used to say, that you could see the clear cut from the satellites in the sky. Obviously, that was dwarfed by what happened then later. What happened there is that there was blowdown in the Bowron region. Since it was a park, they could not do anything about it, and it generated the spruce beetle. Yep. Obviously, we had a similar situation in Tweedmuds Park, when the pine beetle started. I'm not saying that it would not have otherwise, but it did, and then from there on to major proportions, far beyond what I ever would have thought, or where I fly a lot, and flying over these areas and then seeing all the different transitions from red to gray to dead, and then obviously having to deal with the forest, change the forest, and it substantially would initially increase the amount to kind of capture the economic value before it disappeared, and then obviously eventually there would have to be a readjustment to the annual allowable cut. Adding to that then part extraordinary fires, and that happened. I don't know, the global warming obviously has things to do with it in my mind. And then obviously the deferrals, and now the point that I'm making is that I think it is terrible that we're shutting down a pulp mill, but around the province we have already shut down 6 or 8 pulp mills. Here is, with all due respect, I'm saying what took them so long? Because we got far too much capacity here, and we have shut down. If I look up north in Fort Nelson, there was a sawmill. Dedman is gone. Mackenzie is gone. Then looking here, Paul Lumber, that used to have a sawmill, is gone. Netherlands Overseas is gone. Rustad is gone. Looking further out west, in your area, a number of sawmills have gone. So it is no wonder.
It is no one thing.
It's just a matter of time, because that the fiber that is being used is residuals from the sawmilling process. We have shut down, 35 sawmills have closed down in the last 5 to 10 years, and I usually multiply is about 4 sawmills for a pulp mill, and do the math, right? And we will see that. So then it becomes, from my perspective, a question of what else can we do? What do we do now? And what I'm saying is, what we do now, first and foremost, look at the midterm. It will take time to grow this forest. It will maybe be 40, 50 years. That sounds like a lot to you and me, but in terms of time, it isn't. Because I know that in the Bowron region, when I had a little sawmill there, just cutting wood that nobody else wanted, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you go there now, it's amazing how that forest has regrown, and this province has an amazing ability to generate timber and fiber of extraordinary quality because of location and all the other things that we have here. So I believe that that we must invest on an intensive forest on the ground floor, and to making sure that our timber has the ability to grow, and there is no reason in the world that we cannot grow up to 40, 50, 60, virtually double the amount of volume that we have now, which then would mean, since the process is gradual, every 5 years the Ministry of Forests looks at certain areas on a steady basis to make sure can we increase the annual allowable cut, and it gradually will come back to what I believe will be the 60 million cubic meters, and well beyond that if we invest in the forest on the ground base.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to manage our forests better. We need to be a little bit more reactive with the stumpage system as well. I think that would it would help with some of the things that I've seen over the last few years, definitely. And there's just so many things that we could just do better, because we could do things a little faster. We are too slow. Yeah. When we have a forest that half burns, we're too slow to get in there and salvage what we can. We are too slow letting, a lot of these damaged trees, these damaged forests, just letting them rot instead of getting in there and cleaning them up. And, watching, our area, the moose populations were going down, and then it's like you clean up an area, and then it's like the rabbits and the grouse and the moose are repopulating, and they're doing better, and they're not being destroyed by the wolves, because they actually can run through a forest now as opposed to what was there before. Yeah. We forget about those things sometimes, and I really think that when we ask for an uplift, and it's like, yeah, you'll find out 3 years later, it's not, we can't wait. When we have time, there's a lot of jobs that could be, out there right now being utilized if we were a little bit faster on some of these things. And I use the stumpage system as an example for some people that don't understand how it works necessarily. But when the sawmill, West Fraser, I'll use West Fraser as an example, they said, we have to pay our bill. But, we've spent all that money in buying new sawmills, or we've done something different with the money now because we couldn't hold on to it. And so we don't really want to pay that bill now because it's been so far along. Then they go, well, we want a handout. That's what happened when I first became mayor. And Horgan had just come into power, and he was the first premier that ever came to Fraser Lake. And it was like everybody, all the sawmills were going, hey, help us out. We need help, or we're going to lay off people. But they knew that bill was coming. It's not like they didn't know that bill was coming, but then they go and spend all their money. So I think if the stumpage system, was more reactive to the market, like Alberta, we would probably be doing better, I think, in BC. And I hear that a lot.
And I agree with you. And that's even today when I met with the government, and then in my role at Kofi, and so I talk to government a lot. I hope to talk to the premier tomorrow and the opposition leader, probably podcast them. But I will say this, and that I said this morning, the stumpage system is broken.
It is.
We must make it more reactive. And then the other part is that, we have to stimulate investment in further manufacturing, value-added manufacturing. Yeah. You cannot have, in my opinion, and my friends, the big companies, with all due respect, we have 5 or 6 companies that have 75% of the AEC. That means that they control it all if they have 75%. But it's more troubling about that is that they are not investing in BC. They have said we will no longer invest in BC, but you still have the timber. The timber in this province belongs to you and me, the people. Having access to timber is a privilege, and with that go certain obligations, including the concept of pertinency, saying that it should be further manufactured in the region, not only the timber, but also whatever else we can do in further manufacturing, making finished products. That's what we should be doing here. And we should make sure that that happens. What happens with secondary manufacturers now, I was quite involved in that in the 90s already, and we had a small business program where timber would be made available to secondary manufacturers with problems with the system. But that allowed them to negotiate with primaries, and then, because normally it is, okay, you want to have lumber or buy lumber from us, what have you got that we want? And a lot of times that was not the case. That's it. I think that people that make meaningful investments in value-added manufacturing should have access to timber so that they have then something that they can leverage.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think that we need to keep the money in BC. There's nothing worse than, a company coming in and not having any social responsibility at all to a community. They come in, they don't do anything for the community. They expect a lot because they want their workers, obviously, to have somewhere to live. And how do you attract qualified workers to your community if you don't have everything that a community needs, but you're not putting anything in from the corporate side, which is really important. You're good at giving back. Some communities are not, or some companies are not good at giving back to their communities, and that is a problem. It creates a lot of other problems as well, because they come into the community, they take what they need, the resources, and then they leave the community with nothing. And that is hard to watch. Like I've talked about this a number of times about cooperatives. Can you imagine if these were cooperative sawmills that came into BC years ago, and all the money went back into the communities and into the, into the area and stayed within BC as opposed to leaving BC? BC would be completely a different,
no question about
different community.
So what I'm saying is this, Sarah, that I believe that the communities, I had a podcaster, Joan Atkinson from Mackenzie. I will be podcasting the mayor of Houston and more mayors from around northern British Columbia, and saying they have to stand up, speak out about what they want, because they have the power. Right now, what is happening really troubles me is that there was a recent announcement of BCIT that is investing $270 million at BCIT. Now, BCIT, I did a presentation there about a month ago, and my God, that place is big. Yeah. And so for years I've already suggested I help the College of New Caledonia, which does a fantastic job in the region here, all the satellites throughout northern British Columbia, and in saying we have to invest in the center of excellence. Yeah. And rather than putting all that money into BCIT, let's put it here in northern BC. This is where the forest is. 90% of the forest in British Columbia is north of Hope, and we're investing the money there. And what I committed $1 million to. Well, I first made sure that we got the building, the old Canadian Tire building, and and so my name is on it. That's great, So, but that's not what it is about. I think it was about jobs training, and at that point I made a presentation. That must be 25 years ago now. I said it's not the fiber or the raw materials that we have here for further manufacturing. It's not the location, it's not the transportation, it's not money that is available, but will stop people from investing here is access to a skilled workforce. And so if I compare that again to what they did at BCIT, is they invested $270 million, and they made a big fanfare about it that, the big lumber manufacturers, although much of my friends, they won't like this one either. I'm saying that they donated $2.5 million. Yeah. I committed, as a small operator, $1 million to the Center of Excellence. And and I think we collectively have to stand up for those that are committed, including community leaders like yourself, like Joan, like Simon, like here, and saying, no, enough already. This this will change. So.
And there's a lot of advocacy going on with UBCM and NCLJ. I mean, I was really proud to be part of that because of those reasons. Because we were saying things like, we need the money to stay here, or we need the Resource Benefit Alliance agreement. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's a revenue sharing agreement from Vanderhoof over to help the revenue that's being made in the north come and stay in the north, so we can expand our communities positively. Not all of us want to be large communities. Some of us want that smaller, but we still want the amenities and the services, and you still need things, so Fraser Lake's right now trying to get a hotel, there's things that we need. But
collectively be more than BC.
Yeah, collectively what we're seeing in the north, like in my region, we're down 600 workers. We need 600 workers. That's not even including what Artemis Gold is going to need, or the other mine that's going to need people. We need to retain and attract good quality workers. Right. And we have housing shortages, as I'm sure Rentals, they don't exist. Fraser Lake, I mean, our BC assessment just went up 23%. My house went up 27% this year, which sounds great. But we're just getting back to where we were when we hit a major bump in the road when the mine closed. Like this, so we're finally getting back to where we were. But that's great for Fraser Lake. But when I think of the region as a whole and the advocacy that we have to do to say invest in the north, because most of the taxation in BC comes from the north, and then it all goes to Vancouver.
And that's the other part that I say. When I sit here and saying 80% of the GDP of the province of British Columbia is generated in northern BC, and then I usually look over my shoulders and, hey guys in the south, don't forget about it, But we have to speak out more about it. I think the communities have to become more vocal about it and saying enough already, So and I think that probably I hope to talk to the Premier and to talk to the other ones, and I will say that in my podcast that I do all the time is saying that there's huge potential here, and
there is, especially if you want to relieve the pressure in the south, and that's the angle I come at it. There's no housing, and you can't afford to work at London Drugs in downtown Vancouver and have $1 million house. How do people even live
who
down
wants
there?
To live there? Can you imagine?
No, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people come from Vancouver or the Okanagan. They're selling their place for a couple $1 million. They're moving to Fraser Lake. That's why we have no houses. Actually, they're moving to Fraser Lake, and they're going, you know what? I'm putting that money in my account, and I can be a snowbird. And that's what they can do in Prince George as well. I mean, that prices in Prince George have gone up a lot since I was a kid and lived here, but. There's some things that we're missing, including contractors for building houses. Like we need to start building, and the price of lumber was a little too high to build at that time, and finding contractors was tough. But we need people in those trades. Yeah. We need people to get to work is what we need in BC, because I agree. Have a lot of potential here.
I agree. Joan.
Mayor Mackenzie? Joan Atkinson, she's awesome.
Yeah, she was very vocal about it, and and again very an inspiration. And so are you, Sarrah.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Yeah.